Great. All right, well, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Planning Policy, staff, guests. We'd like to call the meeting of the July 10th Planning Policy Commission to order. We're a little bit behind. It's 6:34 p.m. Tonight's meeting is a hybrid meeting. The Planning Policy Commission is in person, but staff or members of the public may be attending virtually or in person. This evening, we do have a few excused absences. Commissioner Millender-Irwin, Commissioner Mole, Baruch, and Vice Chair Patterson. And we also have Commissioner Adair joining us virtually. But I do want to ask the question, do we have a quorum this evening?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Tisha. Let's begin with a little bit of house cleaning, the approval of minutes. So we want to take action on the minutes from May 22nd. And does anyone have any questions, concerns, corrections? I have a minor correction. Vice Chair Patterson did not adjourn us. That would have been me. Just proving we all do read our packets, right? And moving along, we will go to public comment. And right now, we're going to hold general public comment. We will have a time in the meeting when we open the public hearing, when we begin to discuss the tree preservation code. But this is for general public comments. This is for the good of the order, the Planning Policy Commission. So if you would like to speak on any general topic, now is the time. And staff, has anyone signed up to make general public comments?
No, and we don't have any members of the public with us virtually at this time.
Would anyone in the room like to make general public comments? Okay. All right, we'll move along to the business of the day, which is the public hearing, Title 18, the Tree Preservation Amendments. So we're going to hold the public hearing regarding these amendments, and the purpose of this public hearing is to provide a formal opportunity for public comment on the proposed amendments. We'll open the public hearing, which will be followed by a presentation from staff. Then the PPC will have time to ask follow-up questions. We'll take public testimony. We'll close the public hearing, and then the Planning Policy Commission will have an opportunity to debate and make a recommendation, if they so wish, for this topic. Minnie Dollywall, our CPD Director, will be presenting this evening. So Minnie, when you are ready, please feel free to go ahead.
Good evening, commissioners and members of the community. I am going to share my screen and pull this up. Bear with me for a second. I might need some assistance to share. Okay, well, maybe it worked. I think there was some update to this thing that is. So good evening again. So tonight we're here to hold an official public hearing for tree preservation code amendments. And those are Chapter 18.812 of the Issaquah Municipal Code. A little bit of background, we did the major update to Title 18 that was adopted in May of 2023. Since then, when we implemented the tree code and a few things that surfaced as a result of implementation made us relook at the tree preservation code, and that's why we're here. To discuss and suggest those amendments. Environmental Board and both Planning and Policy Commission have had multiple touches with it, including the community members have had an opportunity to weigh in, but tonight's the official public hearing. So we started with going to the Environmental Board back in April, and then Planning and Policy Commission In May, we had 2 meetings, and then in June with the Environmental Board. The major policy changes that are proposed as part of this assortment of amendments, number one is we've revised the tree canopy cover targets. So having, the code now is based on the area-wide percentages that are applied on a parcel-by-parcel basis. So that's not the proposal that's in front of you. It's to set the canopy cover by land use and lot size rather than by sub-area. And the intention there is that you look at how much of it is developable, how much of it is going to remain pervious surface that can actually take some trees and getting the right tree planted in the right spot. Number two is simplified regulations related to tree removal for hazardous nuisance trees and replacement for existing developed residential properties. The intent here is if you already have a developed property and you have a tree that's either hazardous or nuisance, nuisance could be that it could potentially become a nuisance. It's not there yet, but it could become a nuisance in the future. Being too close to your house, growing into the foundations, ripping up the sidewalk, whatever, or a hazardous tree, which could be dead, dying, or diseased that's leaning and could fall. Are just some examples. There's a definition of those two in the code, and so simplifying a process for those to be taken out. So the proposal is to have a replacement of 1-to-1. As a very simple process. If you're not able to do if your property has a lot of trees already and you are meeting the canopy coverage thresholds that are in 18.8.2060, then you can present your canopy coverage information and don't have to replant either. That's how the code is written right now, the proposed code. So 1-to-1 replacement, but that can be foregone for properties that actually have a lot of trees already and meet the canopy coverage requirements. We've clarified that the compliance of the full tree canopy coverage is triggered with new and major redevelopment. And major redevelopment is 50% of the value of the structure. Not all interior includes expansion on the outside. The last major policy update is that we've added flexibility for tree retention requirements in central Issaquah. That's the area that the city's designated most of its growth. Future light rail station is designated to come to central Issaquah. But the idea there is that as redevelopment happens, some of those tree canopy coverage may be lost. But having some checks and balances in place of a criteria for saving those, at least getting trees to be saved that can be saved, but getting those replaced that cannot be saved because of conflict with other cities' policies of getting growth in central Issaquah. So that's sort of the main 4 topics, and there's a lot of other cleanup sort of edits throughout the document that I won't go into, but happy to answer any questions you might have. A little bit of summary of what the feedback we received from Environmental Board initially. There's a letter that they wrote that they do as part of the charter to go to City Council. That's in your packet as well. They wanted us to do some more code testing, wanted us to clarify how tree fund is used. They also had concerns about heat island effect and how some of these regulations might impact that. We are all experiencing hot summers, and trees are help in that respect. They also wanted us to look at multifamily targets. Wildfire mitigation was a concern for them, and identifying planting areas with flexibility. And then for HOAs, they wanted to kind of see if they were taking down trees in multiple areas, could they get one permit, for instance. No code amendments are needed for that, but that is our policy now. I think single-family target you all thought were a little bit inequitable initially. And back in May, we got some feedback about more public education. That will, of course, happen after the code is adopted in terms of easier to understand handouts and implementation tools that we can put out. Clarify replacement requirements, which we've done to say 1-to-1. If you meet the canopy, you don't have to. For landmark, it's 1-to-2. so on. Simplify single-family requirements, move tree removal section, move it so that it's clear when those three different things apply. So we have tree removal for existing developed properties, then we have tree preservation requirements that apply to anything that you're redeveloping. So if you're tearing something down and rebuilding, you still need to save 25 or 35%, depending on where you are, of existing tree caliper inches. So, which is different than your canopy cover. And then we have canopy cover requirements for new trees and existing trees combined you would get at the end of the day. So that's how this is all structured. Relief for emergency events, I think bomb cyclone was fresh and clear in everyone's mind of, whether the city should even require tree permits when you clearly see the downed tree. And then Central Issaquah flexibility requirements, and then they wanted another meeting, which we held with them in June. And the feedback from you all previously was, what about really small lots? So we added a percentage for 5,000, I believe it's 25%. You also asked us to focus on city-owned properties for heat disparity. So that happens through the urban forestry program. Clarify deciduous versus evergreen replacement, adjust hazardous tree exemption. You all talked about tree giveaway program, which can occur. It happens with the Sustainability and Parks Department, and some of the tree funds can be used for that. And then you all asked to review the wildfire code updates, and then include some sample site plans that we have shared with you previously. So then we posed 5 policy questions that are also in your packet to Environmental Board, and that's what they gave us the feedback on, which we have included the final edits. And, the rest of my presentation here is really one-for-one replacement if the site meets or exceeds the canopy coverage, and, they don't have to replant. So as you deliberate, you can use some of this information as you do your deliberation, or there may be other questions you want to use for your deliberation. Canopy coverage percentage, we did include the facet report that kind of gives you some background on how we came to these percentages and numbers. While the data isn't specific for each of the parcel, we don't have canopy coverage data for, for developed lots, it's X percentage, for undeveloped areas, it's Y percentage. But we have an opportunity now to work with King County. They're doing the canopy, flyover and all that, and then we can work with them over what geographies make sense for us for the future to capture some of the data for future code updates. So we'll continue to work with our Parks Department in King County on that effort. When do these things apply? We've clarified that, tree canopy is only for new and redevelopment. Hazardous nuisance is 1-to-1, landmark removal is 1-to-2. The criteria for Central Issaquah flexibility. So you have your 25% caliper inches that you need to save, but you're allowed to, go below that if it's a tree that's a nuisance or a hazardous tree, or you need to take it down because of site access. A lot of these trees are going to come down because of frontage improvements. The city's plan to have wider sidewalks, tree, cover could potentially take down some of the trees along frontage. Public Works Department is working on street standards update, where they are looking at some deviations from the landscaping with standards in the public right-of-way. So that may inform where there may be some flexibility or not. But, as redevelopment occurs, there's the competing priorities. You do want to build that infrastructure of continuous sidewalks with a row of trees, but some of the older stuff that may be in the wrong place may need to be taken out in order to get the new stuff built. Utility connections could be another thing, and then the building placement, if, that's the only place where the building could go. But a lot of these trees, besides the ones along the street frontage, are parking lot trees. So they're not really high caliper inches, and and those kind of trees. Some of the feedback, I think, in the public comments you've received is, what if there's a landmark tree in these areas? Should every effort be made to preserve the landmark tree? And I think Environmental Board also gave some of that direction to see if there's a clump of trees or landmark trees to try and preserve those to the extent they can be preserved. And then number B is saying if the deviation is approved, replacement trees have to be still planted. So it's, there's not a net loss of canopy. There may be temporal loss because you've taken a larger tree that's providing a shade and you're planting a smaller tree that's going to grow in 20 years. However, in the long haul, there is not a loss of canopy is sort of the intent here. So you can do your replacement trees on-site, off-site, or pay fee in lieu of. And then it goes into 1 tree for every 6-inch diameter removed is basically the replacement for those. And these replacement trees are not going to count towards your minimum canopy coverage requirement. So there's an incentive built into that last sentence. If you keep some of those your existing larger trees, you can count them towards your overall percentage that you have to meet. But if you take those down, you will have to replace them, and they won't count towards your canopy coverage. So your canopy coverage would go a little bit above and beyond, which in a lot of these instances would be payment and fee in lieu of type of a situation. So there's that with this criteria. I wanted to highlight that for you all to discuss. Wildfire mitigation, the guidance we've received so far is to if fire department comes in and makes a determination that it is a risk or a nuisance tree, from a wildfire perspective, then we would accept that and allow removal of trees under that provision. Just so that everyone's aware, wildfire urban interface codes are under work. Department of Natural Resources is working on them. Then State Building Code Council in Washington State is going to adopt them, and then they will become, it's going to go and be more than just the tree issue there. It's also what type of materials on the roof, and on things of that nature that'll come from it. But it's a work in progress. It's not adopted yet. So our question was, should we wait until all of that is done before we allow this? Because there's no really guidance. Is it 30 feet clear from your property that is a wildfire risk? Is it 5 feet? So I think the guidance, one of the environmental board members actually had fire department come in and do this assessment for them. And we've talked to fire department, and they look at it very conservatively. So they're not going to say you can clear cut your whole lot and do that. So that's the interim fix until the wildfire urban interface codes come into play. Again, I have a list of these same questions if you want to discuss these during your deliberations. And then if you, depending on public comments, after you close the public hearing, you can deliberate tonight. And if you're ready, you can make your final recommendation to council tonight. Council is on break in August, so we will take it to the first meeting in September for them to adopt. If you need another meeting, we have a second meeting in July that we can come back to you with some additional information if you choose to do that. I think that concludes my presentation.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you, Director Dhaliwal. Okay. We'll start with some questions from anyone from the commission, including Commissioner Adair, who we also see. Just raise your hand virtually if you have any questions. But anyone that would like to open this up, now's the time to ask some questions. Commissioner Krass.
Hello, Commissioner Krass. So first is a comment, then it'll lead into a question. Just from a layman's perspective, the whole caliper canopy thing is a bit confusing and probably hard to follow. And I'm not sure if there's an easy if-then guide for a developer, whoever, to understand it better. But I think that's overall, it's more of a statement. And I'd just like to know more of the thinking of if someone has to take a tree down, and they do replace it, why should that not count? Are we just adding another layer? I'm curious the thinking of having two different tiers of sometimes it counts, sometimes it doesn't. I think number one, I don't think it's necessarily clear or fair, and I'd just like to understand more of the background on that.
Yeah, so that's just in the central Issaquah area. So that's not your residential properties or anything like that. For there, you take one down, you can do one-to-one replacement unless you show that you have lots of trees and you meet your canopy coverage already. So replacement may be waived for them. So that's the simplified path for existing. Now, in the central Issaquah, one of the things that the canopy studies have kind of shown is that's where the urban heat island effect is. That's where there are fewer trees. That's where you have a lot of parking lots and less greenery and all of that kind of stuff. So for whatever little trees you have that can be preserved is sort of an incentive for someone to save a larger tree if they can save it. But then at the end of the day, you need to meet 25% canopy coverage for your site when you do your redevelopment. But you can count that all with your smaller trees, which eventually will grow, but temporarily you're not going to have that coverage. You're not going to have the shade because there's a smaller, newer trees that are being planted. If you get to save some of the older trees, then you can count them towards so that's just an incentive-based approach to keep existing trees, because a lot of times it's more hassle for development to deal with around a tree. You have to preserve it and work around it. It's much easier to just take it down and do it from the beginning. But you do lose that shade for the next decade until the tree becomes larger. That's sort of the thought process there.
Since it's only in the central Issaquah area.
Yeah.
Is there already a study, like a visual study to see the lots? Like, how big of a problem is this? Like, how much of the area is pretty wooded versus, is it mostly parking lots anyway? So this is just a theoretical conversation, or are there going to be some lots that are going to be a big issue?
Yeah, we don't have a full inventory of trees. I think as part of the urban forestry plan, the intent is to get some of that for the street trees or city-owned trees. But every tree on every private property, we do not have an inventory of those. But, you drive up on Newport, you see nice tall trees along Tibbetts Park. You see some of those along the, if you keep, so it's just anecdotal information, but we don't have a good, there are 100 trees or there are 200 trees, we don't know.
Other questions? Commissioner Issaquah.
Hi. I would actually like to bring up one of the questions that brought during the comments from the public that we got in preparation for the meeting. And the question is, who's getting to decide what tree is a nuisance tree, dying tree, dead tree? Is this an applicant getting to decide, or is there be any, like someone from the city will help with that? So how this process is seen?
Yeah, the applicant makes an application for, initial determination that this is a hazardous, that could fall on my house, or this is a nuisance that the roots might grow into my foundation in the next, 5 years, or whatever that assessment happens by the homeowner. The city makes the final decision whether they agree or disagree with that.
Commissioner Matthews.
A couple of people have brought up the cultural significant trees, and I believe that that's not even known if there are any in Issaquah. So if you wanted to preserve those trees, how would you go about it? Would you have the tribes, whenever somebody came in and said they wanted to build a new development on X acres, would you have the tribes come in and go through an inventory of the trees? I mean, is that a possibility, or is that just something that we're not going to look at?
Yeah, those are comments that you received tonight too. I honestly don't know the answer of how that sort of a program works. I've read in news, I think City of Seattle was dealing with it, but I don't know implementation-wise how that would work. I think the comments tonight were saying within 60 days they would do it, but it's unclear to me when would we engage with that? So I just need to talk to them more to understand.
Commissioner Adair? You're muted.
So maybe one idea might be, since they said the cultural trees are all red cedar and then the specific type of deciduous trees, that if those come up in the inventory during redevelopment, kind of flags that you might need a closer look at them. Just an idea.
All right, well, I have a few questions, I'm sorry, Director Dollywall. So going back to policy question 5 for Central Issaquah, I just want to make sure I understand. Could we put that slide back up real quickly? There's a couple of points a little bit of clarification will help. Well, let me see if I can
memory
do,
is.
right, let me see if I can do this off the cuff. I think my original point was, so for Central Issaquah, we have a 25% minimum tree canopy, correct? Now, if a developer, because obviously they need to be able to develop these projects that are feasible, I mean, again, I get that some trees are going to be in the way. The concern is heat islands and things like this. Is that they have to have 25%, even if they cut down trees to make their development work on the lot, they still need to have that 25% on the property, or that 25% can be counted in fee of lieu or off-site? Or they still need the 25% on the property? Okay, so when they cut down, if the property has 30% of trees currently, but they need to take out 15% in where they currently are, they still need to get up to 10% on the property, and if they go up, it still has to be on site. So if they, let's just, yeah, no, trust me, these numbers are fun. So imagine a site has 30% currently, right, before the developer comes in, and they knock out, we'll say 20%. So they just need to do it in order to make the project work. So now they're down to 10%. Right, so they still have to plant extra 15% of canopy on site. And
Sorry about that. So if they can preserve at least 25% of the caliper inches, then they've met the first bar. So they saved, say, 10 trees, but took out 20 others. So out of 30, they took 20 out, but they saved 10. They've met the first tree preservation requirement. Then they have to replant so that the total of those 10 trees and the newly planted trees gives, at the end of the day, 25% canopy coverage for the site.
what happens to, so again, if the site had 35% coverage prior to
Yeah.
construction,
Yeah,
they only have to meet 25%.
correct.
So what happens to that extra 10%? Does
It's
that
lost.
extra, it's lost, it is lost. So they don't have to do fee and lieu, they don't have to do replacement off-site for those 10%.
Correct, because at the end of the day, they met both tree preservation, which is 25% of your caliper inches. They met the 25% canopy coverage at the end of the day when they're said and done with their development.
So if 25% is the number they have to have physically on site, where would the fee and lieu and off-site replanted trees come into play?
Yeah, so if they took all the trees down, they didn't save these 10, they took everything down, they didn't meet the tree preservation part of saving at least 25% caliper inches, then they would have to pay fee in lieu of and still meet their 25%.
Okay. That's where it gets a little confusing, because I
Yeah.
guess I don't know what happens if they've knocked down all those trees. They still have to get back up to 20 years.
With the newly planted trees will have to meet the 25% canopy goals, but because they've cut down everything else, they would need to either replant those on site, so their overall canopy coverage could be not 25%, but say 30%, because they replanted those on site, or they could pay fee in lieu of, or they could plant on off-site in that same sub-area.
I think it might be dead. Sure. Okay, thanks, Ted. Little switcheroo. So again, I guess the question is, what would trigger them to have to do the fee in lieu and the replacement if they physically have to have 25% canopy coverage on site? I guess that's where I'm getting.
Because they're clear cutting every single tree on the site. If
Right,
they-
but if they're replanting everything on site, why would even replacement off-site be an option?
Because they still need to meet the 25, the way it's proposed, they still need to meet the new canopy coverage goals of 25%. But because there's a temporal loss of those trees that were larger, but they couldn't save 25% of those, then those are the ones that they're replanting, either by bumping up the canopy coverage on site, planting off-site, or paying fee in lieu of.
So the central Issaquah is really more about the diameter, not so much,
Anywhere, the tree preservation part, if you own a single-family lot, undeveloped lot, you would be required to save 30% caliper inches of existing trees. And at the end of the day, meet whatever percentage, depending on the size of the lot, you have. So tree preservation and canopy coverage go hand in hand. One is geared towards saving existing larger trees. The other one is long-term, where do you end up after all said and done?
okay. Ultimately, they need to have 25% coverage, and then they need to replace the diameter.
They took out, the larger trees, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to move on because I don't quite understand it, but, okay. Commissioner Zakroff.
I have a follow-up question. What if the property does not allow for 25% to be covered with trees anymore? So they built something bigger?
Yeah, I think the idea is that these percentages have already been lowered from what they were, that the balance of development and the trees can occur. So it's not all concrete jungle, that you actually can soften some of those hardscapes by landscaping. If for some reason they can't meet it absolutely, the code still allows off-site planting or payment and fee in lieu of, but it's a higher bar.
Thank you.
Commissioner Krass.
Let's talk caliper for a moment. So is the intent for the tree preservation counting the calipers for larger, more established trees? Is that so here's the reason why I asked that.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a piece of property, and I'll even say just someone wants to build on a lot that has a bunch of scrub little 1-inch, 2-inch trees, and they're just all over the place. Do those need to be counted, or are they're almost like weeds? So if you start adding a bunch of
Significant tree, yeah,
what's that?
so the rules only apply to significant tree.
Okay,
yeah.
so at what point, what makes?
I think
what's
it's
the
6
de-
inches in our code.
Okay, so anything 6 inches or over,
Yeah.
then count. Okay, that answers my question. So if you have a bunch of weed-like trees,
Yeah,
you're
but
not, those
again-
could add up to a lot if you
Sure.
add up those.
Sure.
Okay.
And the intent is, with the caliper inches, that if you save one large tree, you've saved more. So there's an incentive to save larger trees than a bunch of smaller ones.
It was probably in the packet, in the 137 pages. I might have missed the 6-inch, but thank you.
Commissioner Matthews.
I had two more questions. The first one has to do with the losses of trees and emergencies, and I know that they're requesting not to have to do permits at that time. Is it worthwhile actually tracking locations, species, and location, and the number of trees that have fallen, just so that you could keep a record of what we have lost over time? And so instead of having them have permits to take these down, just to record what was taken out.
Sure, I mean, that could be done. It won't be 100% accurate. We could voluntarily have folks report, if you have a down tree, please, put your information here. It'll be voluntary that people do it. The real assessment will come with the tree canopy studies. So overall, the goal for Issaquah is to increase the canopy coverage for climate action plan. And that's where it would become, are we meeting our targets or not? But that won't necessarily be accounting for how many trees did we lose. I think that right now, Parks Department has done an assessment for the ones on the trees in the parks and such. They have a good idea of, approximately how much has been lost, but we don't have good information about throughout the city what was lost on private property.
The second question has to do with the first policy question about the one-on-one replacement if the site meets or exceeds. That doesn't include landmark trees though, right? That just includes your 6 inches or greater.
We do have a landmark tree section, so removal of landmark trees, replacement is 1-to-2 ratio.
Right.
Yeah.
So that doesn't include this first, the first doesn't count against landmark trees then? It's just for typical
The same
trees.
sort of requirement, I think, is carried, the language that says if you meet or exceed, you still, you could get a pass. So you could take it out for the landmark trees if you wanted to. Always have replacement for landmark trees, if that's the policy direction you want to have.
Commissioner Oliver.
Can we talk about arborists for a moment? I think there have been some comments that suggest there's confusion about when an arborist is required, particularly in cases where the tree's disease or death seems to be quite obvious. Can you clarify that?
Yeah, I think in the current existing code, there was no wiggle room to say we can waive the arborist report. I think it was sort of that balance of you want everyone to kind of do the right thing, but if someone just wants to, use that as a loophole, so that's sort of where it was. We've softened that language to say if it's clearly dead and it looks dead, we don't need an arborist report.
Okay, thank you.
And then I think, Chair Voice, just one thing going back to the one-to-one, we're talking about single-family lots, Minnie, and to your point earlier, we were talking off-camera momentarily. If they already have a higher percentage of the required tree canopy in that lot, then they could take it down and not do one-for-one, correct?
Correct.
And
That's
what's-
how it's proposed right now.
That's, the
yes.
idea is to give our homeowners some flexibility. If they've already clearly have a backyard that has, and they're 40% and a 25 to 35% area that's required, they can take it out without having to pay the $1,000 for the tree replacement.
Correct.
Okay. I think that should probably make some homeowners pretty happy. I mean, that one's pretty straightforward. I think the Facet report was fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
It still is, they still have to document that they meet the canopy coverage requirement. So there's still a little bit of, you've got to show us that you meet this, and that has to be prepared by an arbor, so it's not as streamlined if you want to take that approach, but the way the code is written, if you don't want to do that and you're happy to replant one-to-one, you can take that path. You can just replant and good. Or if you want to make your case that you already meet the canopy coverage objectives or percentages, then you can give us the study in the report and do it that way.
And just quickly, if a tree replacement's roughly $1,000, how much is an arborist report?
It can cost hundreds of dollars, for sure.
So it's not, where does the cost benefit, right? At some point, if a tree replacement's $1,000 and a landmark tree is 2 trees per one, so that would cost $2,000. Is an arborist report typically like a couple $100s?
I don't want to misspeak, so we could get some cost estimates for what it takes. We could come up with a system where they could, homeowner could come up with a good, but, homeowner would need to know the species of the tree. They would need to know, aerial coverage could be used, like a Google Maps or something, but it needs to be on a scale for them. We would need some documentation that it meets the percentage.
Right, I'm just
Yeah.
saying if they're waived off because they have so many trees, but they have to pay $900 for an arborist report.
Yeah, but, correct.
Okay. Are there any other questions? I think the last question I have just regards new development. So again, we're talking about areas outside of central Issaquah, but if you're remodeling your home and we're not talking big development, you're not talking about getting back up to the tree canopy coverage for that particular lot. You're talking about the 1-to-1 or the 1-to-2.
Yeah.
Or again, going back to the previous conversation. But if you're a new development and you're expanding your house's footprint, then you would be required, it would kick in that if you've cleared enough trees, you need to get back up to whatever that lot's threshold is.
Correct. And within reason, if you already have a driveway, you can't, plant it over your driveway or anything, but you would need to, then you would need to go off-site or
Or fee in
payment
lieu.
and fee in lieu of, yes.
Okay. I think those ones are straightforward. Like I said, the central Issaquah one's still, but I think we need to move on, so I don't want to beat a dead horse.
Yeah, the Central Issaquah one is an important, just because of the heat island effect there
Right.
too, but you also want to allow redevelopment, so this is sort of that balanced approach of, at least you can get some replanting off-site or some money for replanting off-site.
Right, and again, I'll save it for the deliberations. The facet report made everything a lot clearer, at least in my view. I was telling Minnie, I wish I would have read that first and then read the packet. It helped a lot, but I did go back and I very quickly read the packet again. But again, I think for the most part, I'm pretty set. Again, I think some of these changes are fine. I just, Central Issaquah, the one that's sticking in my craw a bit, because again, I think I'm okay because we basically established that 25% still need to be on site unless there is very extenuating circumstances.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, if you all
Take another shot at it.
want to recommend, strike out the last sentence and just we could take that forward to council as your recommendation. I just want you all to think about it in terms of the unintended, thing is everyone will then clear cut everything.
No, that's what I don't
So-
want. That's what I don't
So there's no
want.
incentive for anyone to save anything because you've given them the
Right,
flexibility.
no, we want to keep that
Yeah.
incentive for sure. I'm just trying to make sure I 100% get it before we make a recommendation. Yeah, Commissioner Krafts?
It kind of goes back to how do we get out of theory into reality? Because we probably know there's certain parcels that are going to most likely be the development areas around where the potential light rail could be. So Thomas coming there, he'll probably talk. And by understanding, if these are warehouses with big parking lots anyway, and they don't have any trees now, then it's okay, well now they have to do something with trees. I'm just trying to understand if there's a lot, the bigger parcels that may get developed, and I think it may be worth having someone do an informal audit of what those are to see kind of how much tree is on them already.
Yeah.
Because it may be, there's only a couple areas where that could be an issue, the other ones are not.
Yeah.
And it kind of, if I was in council, I would probably ask for that.
Sure, there are 2 or 3 projects that are currently under review that we used as case studies, and I think we shared some of them previously with you. One is a complete tear down and rebuilding. The other one is an office building that they're tearing down and building townhomes on it, and there's a stream, they're going to, restore the buffer in the stream, but the way it's the developable portion of the lot. Even in that particular instance, the parking lot trees were conifers. And so they were in a decent shape that, you could preserve because you have that added thing of shading the stream. If you take those down,
Yeah.
then your stream's more exposed for a longer period of
But
time.
for those examples, do we know the caliper inches and the canopy now is kind of like a snapshot of what those are?
Yeah, we looked at all of
Okay.
that, yeah.
So that exists.
Commissioner Adair's cat. I don't know if, I guess I'll try and do a solid for council because it'll be probably a little bit too late for us. Maybe they don't need it, maybe they'll appreciate it. But it might be helpful, Minnie, at least for Central Issaquah. I know it'd be helpful for me, but again, we don't have the time, is maybe taking a couple different situations in Central Issaquah. Take the Home Depot, for example. What does that look like, right? And you can even do a visual of Home Depot and kind of show, here's just pervious surface, it's complete warehouse. What does the code requirement that we're offering up, what does that look like with a Home Depot renovation? And then maybe taking something smaller like, forgive me because I know it's brand new, but Brown Bear Car Wash, right? What would that look like? And I know it would have helped me because again, a lot of this makes perfect sense. That's the one I'm getting a little stuck up on.
Okay.
But having said that, I know we probably need to move along, so I'll ask one more time. Questions, commissioners? Okay. If there are no more, well, there is no more questions, we are going to open the public hearing at 7:19 PM. And I do believe we have some people that would like to speak, and we'll begin with people that are here in person.
Yes, Richard Scarce? Scarce.
Okay. My name is Richard Scarce. I'm a resident of Montreux and currently vice president of the HOA there. I'm also a current participant in the tree permit process for my own personal property. So I've had quite a few dealings with members of the city about that situation. But I'd like to sort of start my comments from looking at it from a broad scale, drilling down on what we're seeing in codes throughout King County and the area, and then sort of summarized by my own personal experiences. I know that when I first came into contact with tree issues, a lot of this was justified by having the city wanting to maintain the tree city status and so on and so forth. There are 94 cities in the state that are tree cities. There's well over a dozen just in our area. Sammamish is one of the few adjacent to us that is not a tree city. So I went through and looked at the codes in some of these other cities and basically made some notes on how our code compares to other tree city codes in neighboring cities and towns. Newcastle, Bellevue, Mercer Island, and so on. There are those that are restrictive, as Issaquah is in Mercer Island, Bellevue, and Redmond, very similar codes. There are also other tree cities like Covington, Bothell, North Bend, Medina, that are not as restrictive as Issaquah is. Medina surprised me a little bit. But a lot of it has to do with the fact that there is a threshold of where, and most of my comments are going to be centered around single-family homes. I'll leave other comments to others about larger tracts. A personal homeowner, single-family home has to deal with the city, get permits, try to remove a tree, so on, incur costs. The thresholds of when you have to get a permit vary greatly. And I found in the case of Covington was probably the most generous. Removals of invasive trees, nuisance trees, dead trees, any emergency removals, no permits required. They allow up to 3 trees on any lot, 7,200 square feet or less. No questions asked. That means that the city isn't incurring costs to process all of the individual tree requests that are coming in, permits and such. There are other clarifications that I found to be rather important. One city mentions removal of trees do not require a permit if the tree is within 10 feet of a structure. Now, when I look at the canopy report, I'm kind of jumping ahead here a little bit. The canopy situation in my case, the impervious surfaces and structures on the property take up about 2/3 of the lot. The other third of the lot is 100% covered in trees. But in my dealing with the city, I have to replace a tree that's already subject to 100% coverage. Or I have to pay to plant something somewhere else. So you were asking costs earlier, it was $350-some for the permit, $600 to remove the tree. I had another tree I wanted to remove but required an arborist report, that was another $250. And I would have been required to replace 2-for-1 it was what the last policy was. And I don't have a place to put them. So, I've incurred these situations here within the last few months, and it's just something to mention. Other things, there's no mention about taking trees off of steep slopes, which is an important factor here. Wetlands, critical areas, there's no mention in the code for a lot of these exemptions or prohibitions that you shouldn't take trees off of these properties. So the size threshold is also a factor that, in North Bend, for example, it's 12 to 15 inches. There's a different level for conifers and deciduous trees. All of these things need to be reviewed.
And I do apologize. I forgot to mention something very important at the beginning. We usually do about 5 minutes because that's my mistake. So why don't we let the two speakers, since there's only two, go for 7 minutes? I think that's fair. I apologize. I forgot to mention that at the beginning. So
I noticed it was there. I won't take up much more time. The other thing, to get to the cost of the fees themselves, the fee here is $350 or more. I've seen some comments that it was attributable to cover costs incurred by the city. Well, if the thresholds were higher or fewer permits were required, there would be less costs, because I spent 2 months talking to the city to get a nuisance tree done and supplied I don't know how many updates of photos and everything else. I know why there's a lot of cost, because it wasn't a simple decision, and it should have been. The rates in these other cities, the most expensive permit right now is in Mercer Island, $209. The least expensive is $42 in Woodinville. Ours is $353. So there's more data there. I'll be welcome to answer any of your questions. So. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And again, I apologize for that. That is my fault. So we will, and I believe it's only fair to let our next speaker also have 7 minutes, if she'd like.
Yes, Susan Glicksberg.
Hi. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. I'm Susan Glicksberg. I also am on the Montreux board and a resident of Montreux, and I've been at the environmental board giving my comments, and my comments will probably be a little more detailed than Richard's. In looking at the code as it currently is with the rewrites, there's still some confusion. I think the one-to-one, thank you, was clarified. We've been dealing with interpretations of 6 trees. When one has to be taken out, 6 trees have to be planted, and we have obviously from 100% down to about 8% tree coverage on our lots, because our lots are primarily structure and infrastructure. So thank you for clarifying that. I think that will be helpful. But the wording still says not less than, which implies it can be more than. So I think being really clear and just saying it's one-to-one would be helpful. Also, I think it's unclear as to what requires a permit. Maybe it's clear about what requires a permit, but an arborist report, you have to dig through to find where a permit's required, where a permit's not required, where an arborist report is required, and then whether there's a fee associated with the tree permit, because I think one of my comments, what the response was, there's no fee associated with it. So I think it would be helpful to say a fee is required, a fee is not required for the different scenarios. The last thing is the emergency tree removal. Obviously, everybody's thinking back to the bomb cyclone. We had trees that fell over the roads. We had trees that fell on houses. I know it's a delayed thing. You take pictures, you get an arborist report. If the tree fell on a house or across a road, it has to be removed, We can't function, obviously, with trees on houses or trees across roads. So why would an arborist report be required? It seems like that should be an easy one where you say it's an emergency, the tree, you take the pictures, you show the city, we removed the tree from the house, from the road, just for consideration. And then lastly, we have an example in our community. We have trees that are sort of landscape trees that go up as we go up the Village Park Drive, which is the entrance to our community. There are 2 dead trees. We have been, they're obviously dead. Comments come from our homeowners saying these trees are dead, when are they going to be removed? Well, our struggle is the city won't let us remove them. And again, they're obviously dead. We want to do the right thing in Montreux. We are very careful about NGPE trees and our residents removing them when they're not supposed to. But if there are 2 dead trees, it should be a simple process to get a tree permit to remove those trees, replant 2 additional trees, and maintain the tree cover, because right now they're not providing any tree cover, obviously, they're dead. So we need some help with that. And also, I think you put in the slides, there was something about homeowners associations. When we, as a homeowners association, apply for a tree permit, it's been under the individual on the board's name, and then when we change roles, that name has to be changed. So if there's some way that we can apply for a permit as a homeowners association, that would be helpful. And a lot of this isn't, I think, clear from the code. So those are my comments. Making it clearer about when a permit's required and what the fees are would be helpful. Because again, we want to do the right thing, but all these requirements make people want to do the wrong thing. So anyway, thank you for your consideration, and we look forward to seeing the final code.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Susan. Tisha, do we have anyone online that would like to comment?
We have one caller online. Caller, if you press *3 on your phone, that will raise your hand and we can call on you if you're interested in making comments. Just pausing for a minute here, but I'm not seeing a raised hand from that individual. Oh, and there it is.
That's why I was pausing for dramatic effect.
All right, so caller, I'm going to make you a panelist now, and just requested that you unmute. You have the floor for 7 minutes. Okay, give me just a minute here. Oh, shoot. Caller, my apologies. I saw you just unmuted and it coincided with me trying to help you. If you can unmute one more time. Okay.
Hello?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, well, yes, my name is Roberta Brown, and I'm an Issaquah resident. And I just have 2 quick questions. And obviously, it's very complex, and I appreciate all the work that's gone into it. I followed the Title 18 development, the original one, and was very excited about the tree preservation. And now I'm a little disappointed. But one quick comment has to do with wildlife mitigation. And I attended this spring symposium of the Northwest Horticultural Society, where some speakers are, in fact, working on with the Department of Natural Resources and others on codes for the state and so forth. And as a consequence of listening to them, I would join the chorus of those who are strongly recommending that we wait until the city's wildlife-urban interface code is developed before putting this in, this element. And one reason for that I learned is that the Natural Fire Protection Association guidelines are extremely general and considered somewhat severe for the Puget Sound area. And I know that the fire departments are accepting those as the guideline, at least I believe so. And so I think it needs to be more nuanced before we just throw it in as an exception. Anything that the fire department approves can be accepted. Um, and I hate to say this, but wildfire is one of the latest excuses used to remove trees. And we also need to emphasize the need to remove underbrush, which is even more important than trees. Trees, in fact, as we all know, can help prevent fire by preventing heat islands, and it depends on the tree. There are trees that are fire resistant. I've been following, for example, in Berkeley, they have a beautiful development of their code for wildfire. And, and this is also fire resistance. It's not fireproofing. So we're not going to an extreme. And so I would just like to recommend that it be removed from the exemption for now. And there could be other ways if it clearly there's a problem to bring it in as a nuisance tree or something. And that we wait until we can really develop that with several nuances, with balance and knowledge, possibly even as a separate section. And that's my major comment. I had one other related to arborists, and I understand there's a lot of problems with that, but I'd like to follow up on Mark Clement's public comment that there are arborists and there are arborists. Arborists who work for tree removing companies often do what the developer asks and state that the tree is diseased or dying, when in fact I've seen this firsthand, it's perfectly healthy. So if there's some way to develop guidelines for arborists that work independently or at least that are respected for independent judgment, and I have no expertise in how to do that. But thank you. I appreciate the work. Take care.
There's no one else indicating a desire to speak.
Great, thank you, Tisha. And I'd also like to point out, we did receive public comments. Obviously, this goes back a long time. You guys received the matrix, and then we also received some very late 11th hour comments today, which I'm sure everybody read in their fullness. So I want to thank everyone for speaking on behalf of the public hearing, and we will, seeing as there are no more speakers, we're going to close the public hearing at 7:37 p.m. So there is formal action requested on this agenda item. I am looking for the commissioner who is willing to make a motion. Commissioner Krass.
I'd like to recommend approval of the proposed Title 18 tree preservation amendments as presented.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Allender. So it's only appropriate the person who made the motion should have the opportunity to go first if they so choose. And this is the time for us to deliberate, obviously.
I think we covered a lot of ground, and we've seen it a couple times, and I appreciated going back and forth between some of the different boards and commissions because it covers lots of different areas. So, I mean, my only feedback was it'd be nice to, especially the Central Issaquah one, just getting more granular on some of the bigger properties and seeing what those could be, and it'll either make us feel better or make us scratch our heads and say this is going to be much harder, but at least we'll know. So I think I've covered all my other comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Krass. Well said. Commissioners? Commissioner Zakharoff.
I'm in a position now that we've heard some very valuable comments today, and they should be considered before we proceed with just adopting this plan. So I would maybe ask for some more time to work on this.
Commissioner Adair.
I agree with Commissioner Zakharoff. I think some of the comments today were really compelling. And I think we should especially be kind of considering, yeah, the difficulty of removing, dead trees in an emergency. I don't know if this document goes far enough to clarify when people could just remove dead and diseased nuisance trees, like after the bomb cyclone. But on top of that, sorry if you heard my daughter, I also wanted to address the overhang issue, which is in these amendments. I'm not sure if that's what we're voting on today, but the idea that overhang canopy counts towards your percentage, which we've had a discussion about that before, and I don't think it's made it into this document, that at least not the one that I'm looking at. And I can send an image about what my concern is, but I do also kind of want to discuss whether overhang canopy can be included in somebody's tree canopy percentages.
I believe it is. Yeah, I believe it is.
Yeah, so I think it should not be included personally, and we kind of discussed this at the time, and I think so I'm not sure how to proceed because, was this voted on at the time?
I can't remember. I don't believe it was
No.
voted on.
Yeah, I didn't think it was voted on, and I just would like further discussion on that issue as well, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Commissioner Matthews.
I agree with the last two commissioners on, there's a lot of issues I think that we haven't resolved that are in notes, but we haven't really considered them in full yet, and I think that we should before we adopt this in full.
Commissioner Olener, would like to speak? Okay. As for myself, we have seen this multiple times. I mean, I'm happy to take a vote, and if we want to use the second meeting in July, which is TBD as of now, we can. My personal thinking is, again, when we did the original tree code in 2023, we knew we were making a big jump from 50 to 55. We knew, the product was not perfect. We knew it was ambitious, it was aggressive, it's what the community wanted. They wanted even more coverage, and that's what we tried to do. We also knew that this was going to come back and be tweaked once it lived in the real world. I think these tweaks basically speak to a lot of that. 55% is pretty aggressive. I'm not going to say that there aren't some things that I'm learning. I'm perfectly comfortable moving forward, but that's fine. Just a few of the things that were brought up as far as the HOA and the owners. I think the idea right now is we're moving towards, it depends on where the tree is. If the tree is on a homeowner's lot, then that would be responsibility of the homeowner. If it's in a common area, that would go to the HOA. So I think there are clarifications we're making. I think the relief for fallen trees, we've kind of already discussed a little bit in the very beginning, which is you don't need to, right now the way it's written is if someone does take down a nuisance tree, they have to document it. They can't just cut it and then expect, they have to document it, they have to send it in, and if the city finds in its findings that the tree was not a nuisance, then they can be penalized. If they find after looking into it, then they can be, it can be waived. So I think a lot of this stuff has been addressed. A couple of things that I guess if we do go to another meeting, what I would suggest are, I am curious to know why our permits are more expensive than our sister cities. I'd like to know a little bit more why ours are so expensive. As far as the firefighters, again, I know this is just an interim thing until the state does begin to pass their laws. I know we're coming out with our own, so again, I'm fine with the firefighters playing an interim role at the moment, which is what this is proposing. Kind of like Commissioner Krass, I'm trying to get my head around the central Issaquah plan fairly, but that wouldn't keep me from moving this forward because I just make a note for council that, yeah, look at some visuals and, obviously they'll use their best judgment. We're not actually adopting anything ourselves. We're sending a recommendation. And we can send that recommendation with asking council to look at a few things that we struggled with. That's perfectly fine. Again, we're not adopting any policy this evening. So I just want to make that real clear. If you guys have concerns, you're probably going to have the same concerns in 2 weeks. We can still send those on their way. All we're doing is saying this can move forward. So I just want to make that clear. Couple more thoughts, but let's hear from Commissioner Adair.
So I agree with you in principle on a lot of that, Commissioner Cross. I just think my main issue right now is that I feel like we're discussing these things and I understand it when we're discussing it, it all makes sense. And then when I'm looking at the actual tree code document, I'm not seeing that what we discussed is being reflected in that specific document. So then I'm going back to that and saying, oh wait, well, we discussed overhang and we kind of came to a consensus. It felt like at the time on lot overhang, but now I'm looking at the document itself that we were sent with the agenda packet, and it's not being reflected. And so, like for example, with the nuisance trees and the removals of the nuisance trees, from you, the way you explained it, perfectly reasonable, and I understand that. And then I'm looking at the agenda packet of the actual tree code, and it's not coming across, I guess, as clearly as it could. Now, I'm happy moving forward, and maybe we have a meeting where we kind of make a bullet point list of concerns we'd like City Council to explain, but that's just where I'm coming from.
Thank you, Commissioner Adair. No, and it's perfectly fair. I mean, if that's the way everyone feels, like I said, this is just my opinion. But again, if everybody feels that way, that's why we have a July 24th, I believe it is, that is open for us. But we also need to be aware of the timeline so council can do their job. So again, let's try and all kind of come with the idea that July 24th, whether you want to tack on amendments, whether you want to vote no on it, let's try and make sure this does move forward in whatever fashion, yay, nay, whatever. But we do need to come to a conclusion here. Commissioner Zakharoff.
Okay, what if we send it to the council with bullet points that we kind of like want them to pay more attention to several things there?
Yeah, I think that's perfectly fine. I don't think that's a problem, Minnie, right? I mean, again, if you guys want another meeting, that's perfectly fine too. Again, at some point, we also need to conclude, and so.
Sure, yeah, if the commissioners are ready to give us direction on fix this, fix that, that can all be captured in your recommendation, and we'll make those edits to the document that we take to the council committee.
So quick, I guess, is this correct to say point of order? Even though the public hearing's closed, if we had the meeting next week, we wouldn't open a public hearing. It would just be to come up with ideas for the council to consider when they're looking at their recommendation.
Yeah, the official public hearing was today. It's closed. You could reopen it and open it till tomorrow, but I think at some point, the comments come in, and then the deliberation starts. The reality is, I think we still let people make comments during the general comment period, so it's not like we ever cut off, but the official public hearing is over. The idea being that we can capture all the public comments and then say, here's what we did with them, and here's a response back.
So I think my feeling is, thank you, Minnie. I think my feeling is we can take a quick vote on who wants to have another meeting. If you feel like you want to take in more of some of the things you heard this evening, or if you're struggling with some of the issues still, that's fine. We could also do it the other way and just tack on some of our concerns and let this thing continue to move forward. Either way is acceptable. Like I said, I want to make sure we're sticking to the timeline. So let's just start with a quick show of hands. Who would prefer to have the meeting on the 24th to have as a follow-up? Okay. Yeah, so we have one commissioner, so we will not have another meeting. So what we want to do and try to accomplish this evening before we move on is let's start. I don't think they need to be amendments, do they? Because we're not trying to amend things. We're just trying to bring things to council's attention, concerns. I mean, you can make an amendment, obviously, if you don't like something that you see that you completely disagree with. But if they're just concerns, we can send that along with our recommendation saying, hey, these are a few things we'd like council to pay attention to. I think that's fair, right, Minnie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we want to capture consensus, so if there's disagreement over a change, then half of you want it, half of you don't, then you probably should take a vote on that one, that particular discussion.
Commissioner Olener.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to Commissioner Adair's comment about overhang. And I'm asking Director Dillawall to clarify the intent there. My sense is that if you've got a lot and you have overhanging trees that are mature, if you don't count those toward your coverage, you may not have room to plant trees and have additional coverage because you've already got some of your property covered by those overhanging trees. Is that what the intent was?
Yeah, I think we heard some debate, like if there is coverage on my property, even though the tree is not on my, is on the sidewalk, why shouldn't that count towards my coverage? And I think that's what's reflected in the draft, that it does count. If I'm not mistaken, that's how it's written.
Yeah, no, it makes sense to me. I mean, again, trying to be user-friendly. Commissioner Zakroff? Oh, okay. Commissioner Adair?
Hi, so my impression of the meeting was that there was some discussion. I'm going to try and share my screen. Let me know if this works. I have a picture that I can show you. Okay, and this is my concern specifically with overhang, and so maybe, Minnie, you can help address it, and maybe I'm understanding this incorrectly. But if you can see this, we have two lots side by side, and in lot 2, their overhang counts towards the percentage of lot 1. So let's say lot 1 develops, and they redo their trees based on their overhang from lot 2. But then later on, you have lot 2 is now developed. So lot 1 is still technically in compliance. They met their requirements. Now lot 2 has their own requirements. And what we have is net loss and canopy while both are in compliance. And that was mainly my concern, and that I brought up at the meeting, and I don't think was quite reflected in the document at the time that we've seen now. So it wasn't necessarily about sidewalk trees, but that overhang canopy of neighboring parcels, or maybe this section isn't including that. That's where we are.
So if I understand your concern is that Lot 1 doesn't control the development on Lot 2, and Lot 2, when that develops, could potentially take the tree down, which counts towards your canopy. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of those if scenarios that can play out. But at that point, yes, Lot 1 would become non-conforming for the canopy coverage, but not by much, if it's just one tree that overhangs, kind of a thing. And then when they redevelop or they do something, that's when it would come into play. But potentially when Lot 2 is being developed, we could, look at that. But it does add that you're counting your neighbor's tree towards your canopy coverage problem.
That was great. I appreciate the visual, Commissioner Adair. Awesome. I will say, I think that's probably negligible. A lot of people don't let their neighbors, their trees and shrubs grow in their yard. So I do appreciate the visual. I would think it'd be negligible. I think if we tried to start counting canopies and what overhangs, we find ourselves going down a rabbit hole that could be very difficult. Just my opinion. Would you like, anyone want to follow up, or do we want to move on to another concern? Okay. I believe, Minnie, somewhere in this 137 pages, we do bring up the HOA and the homeowner split, correct?
I think the comments were more, tonight's comments were who has authority to sign for the HOA. I think we've said the president or someone, we need a human being to kind of say that. We can't have a generic HOA board, is my understanding, and that's probably where. Yeah, so whoever the current board, whoever can actually represent the HOA board.
Yeah, I think the point is the bottom line is, unfortunately, we can't control who's in charge of the HOA. That's part of the HOA's structure. But ultimately, someone has the authority to reach out as far as the HOA. My thing is, if there's an issue between the HOA, it's really what's in the common area and what's on somebody's specific lot.
Yeah, we'll work with the HOAs,
Okay.
Obviously, it's not static, HOA boards and presidents
Right,
change.
correct.
But whoever has the authority to speak for the HOA has the authority to apply for the permit at the time the permit is applied for.
Yeah, I think that's more than fair. I believe the other one, a concern was the firefighters. I'm just going to really quickly, Minnie touched on that. Basically, it's an interim thing. This is not a long-term solution. We are waiting for Washington State legislatures. We're waiting for our own Issaquah plan to go, and so I'm perfectly fine with the firefighting situation. Commissioner Zakroff.
Thank you. Well, my concern is about permits. How can we speed up permits for nuisance trees, dying and dead trees, and all of the emergency situations? And also, of course, looking at the cost, because yes, if we are the most expensive city, this is kind of like unfair, and it's understandable, and it shouldn't be that way. That's one thing. And the other thing is many comments have that is what are we doing with the process, the easy process of just removing significant trees is a concern for many people. And then the other thing is we did not discuss the problem areas and slopes, and trees can be removed easily there. So it probably we should take a look at that, and I would recommend the council to take a look at that. I'm done. Thank you.
Yeah.
No, you're fine. I think as far as the slopes, let me know if I'm wrong, Minnie, but I think the slopes, it's still your property. So it's still part of the tree canopy. I mean, again, even if you have to clear it, there's other parts of the code which say what trees you can remove on a steep slope regardless. Some of these trees you can't remove. And for some reason, if you were able to remove trees on a steep slope, then the tree code kicks in.
Yeah, I mean, the steep slope is also a stability issue.
Right.
And the roots and stuff hold on to the stability of the slope, so the last thing you want is clear cutting and then a landslide or anything like that. But that's the critical area code that applies, so we have buffers from how far back you can be. If it's a hazard tree that's going to, fall and land on a road down below because it's now diseased and it's leaning, it's on a steep slope, we would allow that removal at that point, but it's only hazardous trees and nuisance trees, anywhere for that matter, yeah.
But ultimately, there's code that supersedes that, and there's also that, when they go for the building permit, all of this stuff would be addressed.
Correct.
So I think, again, it's not a big concern for myself.
Yeah, in terms of the fee issue that has come up, so there is a $0 fee for hazardous tree removal. So, I don't know why we have that, because we do spend time figuring out it's a thing, so it's a no-cost permit. There's a $300 and some for the other permits. And the permit fees are not in this title. They are in Title III. And council looks at the fee schedule on, we've been taking fees to council on an annual basis because of the cost of living expense and other things. So some of these other cities may have never touched their fees for a long period of time. Labor costs go up. So we do keep up our fees. Since I've been here for the last 3-4 years, we've had so that it's not a big jump. So they don't go for $42 for some of the city, and next, when they look at these budgets, it becomes a $500 fee. So that may be a slight difference, but these are based on true costs of time. But I wanted to point out a hazardous tree is a $0 fee.
Great. Yeah, Commissioner Kraft.
On the fees, I think it's also, you don't want to incent an unintended consequence. If your fees go up, then people are just going to cut trees down they're just going to do nighttime permits and just do it.
Yeah, your fees double if you cut without a permit.
Yeah, but no one's going to catch
We're
them.
code
Unless you
enforcement.
do it on Grand Ridge and you're on the news.
Sure.
But
there's a code enforcement
But I think there
element.
needs to be a balance. I think that was a very good data point that came in, because unless you look, you have no idea. This is what it is here. But I do think there isn't, if it gets too expensive, and maybe it's there, maybe it's not, but then people are going to just do something without permits, and then you're going to have a different issue then. So you want to just have that balance.
Sure. But I want anyone who's listening, that you cut down trees without permits, you are going to be double feed. So if your neighbor calls, because the community's eyes are on these trees, people that live in this community value the trees. So we don't go about catching people, but we hear from neighbors all the time if there's illegal cutting.
For the record, I was not condoning that. I'm
No,
just saying,
I'm just
human
saying.
nature, the river will find its course if it's.
Sure, but if you get caught, you
Yes.
have to pay 700 than 300.
I think, and again, I'll just look for a little bit of head nods and whatever. I think maybe just to let council know, we're concerned that it does seem that our tree permits are higher than most. If they could look at that, because we don't want to encourage bad behavior.
Sure.
I think that would be something that we could see going up there and just.
Yeah, I just didn't know if everyone knew that hazardous tree removal is $0.
Right.
The other one is if the tree is already down, you don't need a permit. So if the snowstorm occurs or a bomb cyclone happens, the tree is already down, there's not a tree permit needed for a tree that's already removed.
That's actually written?
That's my understanding. We'll
Okay,
double
let's,
check.
that's maybe as a follow-up, just to make sure those
Yeah.
are,
Yeah.
those are clear.
Okay. We're going to move on from permits. Is there any other concerns we'd like to send along with this recommendation to council? Again, just for me, like I said, again, maybe they won't need it, but some visuals regarding the central Issaquah would be helpful, because I'd like to follow it up. That's really, again, with something we've seen and touched so many times, I'm very comfortable with a large majority of it. That's one area. I mean, it makes sense for what Facet said to be able to do by lots instead of sub-areas. So again, reading that report was fantastic. It seems to be more equitable for homeowners, smaller lots. I appreciate the PPC actually asking for smaller lots. I thought that was great. So again, I'm pretty happy with the cake that's been baked, especially someone who's actually part of the tree code originally. Again, we always knew this was going to come back and be tinkered with. Commissioner Adair.
Just a quick little request, and maybe this can be sent to City Council. I'm just really curious about the math that Facet used. It was a great report. I did read it. It helps a lot. I know I got a formula working backwards from their table, but if someone wants to just send me the actual mathematical formula, I would really appreciate it. Okay, awesome.
Oh, you're talking about pi and r. Yeah, I saw that too. Yeah.
Yeah, no, like the area times the percentage of the current canopy times the, the average PBA. Great, I would love to see that.
Yeah, that was some interesting math. All right. I think, so it sounds like hopefully many of you were able to document some of our concerns, some of the things we'd like to see go along with this recommendation.
So what I have so far is, we'll confirm the language supports down trees don't require a permit, some visuals for central Issaquah. There was some debate about the overlap trees, but we can take a look at but I think there's, I want to make sure I capture.
I think I said it was negligible. I mean, I don't know if everyone feels that way. I do appreciate Commissioner Adair's awesome visual, though.
So where leave as is, as it's proposed? Okay.
I think we're okay.
Is that the consensus around that topic?
Everybody all right? Okay. I'm getting a lot of head
I
nods, so we're good.
think, and then, that's what I have so far. So who can sign for HOA? That's really not a code issue. That's more an implementation thing that will make sure the interplay between critical area code and tree code. We'll see if we want to add some at least reference to if you are in a stream buffer, critical area, slope, wetland, you also are subject to critical area regulations.
Sure.
Just so that that link can be maintained or, called out. And then other things I think we heard tonight were some language around one-to-one and just making it clear that it's just one-to-one, so we can fix the language related to making, take out any ambiguity or how, folks are reading, make it plain language there. What else? The tribes comment, yes. So I will reach out to them and see. I think it's more about a heritage tree program, which isn't necessarily part of the code, but I'm thinking we have a heritage tree program, at least for city-owned trees, that Parks Department can get designation for heritage trees separately, but I need to understand more about what tribes' concerns are on that. If you have any feedback on that topic of culturally sensitive trees, I can keep that, take that to council from your perspective.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Minnie. Is there any other concerns the PPC would like to address? All right, so I believe there is a motion on the floor, and because we did not amend anything, we just added some of our PPC flavor to it. I think basically we just need to repeat the motion and then ask for a vote. Is that correct? So if, yeah. Yeah.
You want me to talk more?
Sure, go for it, Commissioner Kratz.
Okay. I'd like to recommend approval of the proposed Title 18 tree preservation amendments as presented,
With our additional comments, I suppose.
with the additional comments that we just.
Excellent. Is there a second? We'll do it for him. I don't know.
I'll redux here.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner Allender. I got to read up on Robert's rules. It's been a while. All in favor? Aye. Okay. I believe that was unanimous. Oh, all opposed? No one? Okay. Well, again, thank you, Commissioners. Thank you for your hard work on what's been a big project for us for the last.
Yeah, so if I may repeat the next steps on
Sure.
this for members of the community here. We will take your recommendation to council committee in September. And in that, we will package all the information we heard today. And then council committee then makes their recommendation to full council, who will then actually adopt the ordinances. And I'm happy to connect with anyone offline and we can talk more.
Excellent. Well, again, we want to thank everyone for commenting, those in person, those online or on the telephone, and of course, all the previous comments that we have received. Ready to move on? All right. The next item on our agenda is an introduction and a learning tutorial on the light rail station planning. This should be interesting. And tonight, Thomas Valdez, Senior Transportation Planner, will be presenting. So Thomas, when you are ready, please go ahead with your presentation.
I do apologize. I need 1 minute here to prepare. Great. Thanks so much for having me tonight. I'm Thomas Valdez, Senior Transportation Planner. Tonight I will be presenting on the Central Issaquah Station and Alignment Study. Next slide, please. Just hoping to give an introduction, provide some background information, talk about the light rail planning activities we've done over the last 10 or so years, talk about the purpose of the study, what we're hoping to achieve, and the timeline that we have over the next 18 months, and the ways that we hope to engage with this commission. Next slide. So this slide represents, just at a very high level, the light rail activities we've done. So in 2012, we adopted the Central Issaquah Plan. This sees Central Issaquah as a very walkable, vibrant urban neighborhood. In 2015, the city worked with the Puget Sound Regional Council to designate the urban core area as a regional growth center. So we are expecting the majority of jobs and housing growth to occur in this area. In 2016, voters approved ST3. This is a ballot measure that will expand high-capacity transit throughout the region, and we can see a lot of this work being played out currently. Issaquah just happens to be sort of the last project on that continuum. Last year, we adopted the Light Rail Planning Guide. This talks about, at a very high level, just things that we anticipate will be topics that we'll need to address when we work with Sound Transit. And very recently, in April of this year, we adopted a vision and guiding principles for the station area around Central Issaquah. I'll get into more of that in a future slide. So this green area represents the Regional Growth Center boundary. This is generally where we expect light rail will be placed. This project is a sound transit project, but the city is working proactively to study areas that we think as a community it would be good to locate light rail. This next slide talks about the line itself. So this is what we're calling Ski Link, South Kirkland Issaquah Link, which we think is kind of fun given our connection to the mountains. So the line itself will connect from South Kirkland, connecting through Bellevue out to Eastgate, and then it'll terminate at a southern terminus in Central Issaquah. So I just wanted to pause here and just mention, and I get this question fairly often, so I just want to get ahead of all this. Sound Transit is the project lead. They're going to plan, design, build, and manage the service that we will receive. They make all the final decisions on where the station will go, where the track will be located, and really just their intent is to align with their own regional priorities. So as a region, we have certain things that we're trying to do. Sound Transit is going to try to achieve that with a light rail station. The city, we're hoping, and the community members of this area, we're hoping to also align our local priorities so that that is part of the equation. So really the point of the study is to ensure that we are getting ahead of this. We are several years before Sound Transit is even beginning. We want to make sure that we have a laser-focused view on what we're trying to achieve with this study and with the service that we will be getting. So this is a recipe that other communities have done, so we're really just kind of following the process that has worked for other communities. And so this study itself is part of that process that we have begun about 3 years ago. So this document, which was a product of a transit study that we kicked off in 2022, this document talks about the prerequisites for a station area, the things that we know a light rail station will need to be successful. It also talks about the timeline. So Sound Transit will be bringing light rail to the community as early as 2041, and they follow a pattern in terms of their timeline, following a FTA funding process. So working backwards, the earliest that Sound Transit will approach Issaquah is about 2027. So we have a couple years to prepare, and that is why the study that I'll talk about in a minute will be finishing up right before that timeline. So we're trying to get ahead of all this. We acknowledge that there are some key considerations that we need to be thinking about with a light rail station. So we've thought about that a little bit. We're going to dig into that a little bit more with this study. There's also some conceptual locations that were located with this planning guide. So we're going to dig into that a little bit more with this study. And one of the first proactive steps out of this planning guide is to develop a vision and guiding principles. So next slide, please. And that's something that we did over the last 18 months. So we did finish this in April. Over a very lengthy process, we worked with community members, developed focus groups, had a survey that was taken by over 805, I believe, participants, heard a lot of feedback. Overwhelmingly, there's a lot of excitement about a light rail station, but we also want to make sure that it feels like an extension of the community. So this document, and there's a very succinct couple page area that talks about the vision statement itself, and then a couple key guiding principles that we're going to be thinking about as we think about where a station could go in Central Issaquah and where that track alignment could also go. So this study, the primary deliverable is to have a planning report. This report is going to be given directly to Sound Transit when they're ready, which we think is about 2027. I think the key crux is, something we're all thinking about is where is the station going to go? And so that's going to be the primary time spent on this is just working with the community having a lot of conversations and picking that one location that we're really going to rally behind. So this document will begin by looking at existing conditions as they are now in Central Issaquah, but also where we anticipate growth will happen between now and 2044. The Vision and Guiding Principles document that we developed in April, that's going to be our North Star, and that's going to help us create measurable criteria. We're going to do that before we even look at any locations. We don't want to sort of fit a location like too early, so we want to develop the criteria just at a very high level. This is what we're hoping to achieve. The community has already said we want X, Y, and Z in terms of a vision and guiding principles, so let's make that into a point system. So that point system, that evaluation criteria, will be then used as we consider up to 6 locations for where light rail could go in Central Issaquah. And through many conversations, the goal is going to be to just pick that one location and stick with it. The city is really trying to partner with Sound Transit. We acknowledge that over the last couple of years, we've seen that light rail has been stalled in terms of its operations. A lot of that has to do with people they can't figure out where to put the station, and then they got to study it again. So if we can really get the community involved and say, hey, we've talked about this for many years, and this location is going to be a good fit for the community, I'm hoping that can really ease Sound Transit and making sure that we can help them achieve their project. So this is the timeline that we're expecting for this project, and I'm anticipating about 3 touch points with the PPC. So we are in Q3. We are about to kick off this study, and we'll then look into siting and alignment conditions. I'll want to come back to the PPC. I'm on the calendar in Q4 to talk about that evaluation criteria, so interested to hear what you all have to say. I'm meeting with 6 boards and commissions, so I'm getting a lot of feedback. I'm also really interested in hearing what other folks from the community are thinking. So my goal is really to chat with anybody as often as they want. I'd love to hear lots of perspectives on this. In Q1 of next year, I'm also on the calendar to bring back a couple alternatives to look at. So we're hoping to just do a couple alternatives, and then if something gets developed through the process, we'll have some space to maybe look at 1 or more additional locations. But we are really constrained in budget. 6 locations is as much as we can do. We're very thankful that council approved funding for this project. It's going to be really important to make sure that we're prepared for those discussions with Sound Transit. So really appreciate it. But we do want to sort of be really judicious with the locations that we study. By the end of the year, and this is in order to really get ahead of Sound Transit, we are hoping to adopt this by the end of 2026. So that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions at this point, but just know I'll be back very soon again.
Lots of questions, Thomas. Lots of questions. That's so fascinating. Commissioner Matthews.
I noticed that it showed that one of the stations is at Lakemont Boulevard. Does that mean, you probably don't know this answer, but does that mean it's going down Newport Way into downtown, or is it going to be on I-90 into downtown?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Lakemont Station is a provisional station that was identified by Sound Transit in 2016. And the provisional part is if they have the money for it. So in all honesty, we're not sure that the station will actually be built. It is possible that it's built, but that's a really key consideration to think about. The study is really focused on Central Issaquah. In the 2016 ballot measure that Sound Transit put through and that voters voted on, the conceptual idea was to run it down I-90. So that's sort of the thinking that we have at this point, is that they'll run it down I-90.
Commissioner Ohlner.
Obviously, there's a lot of infrastructure that goes along with creating a new station and line. Does the ballot measure funding cover things like parking garage, changes to local and regional roadways, et cetera?
Yeah, another great question. The ballot measure does provide for parking. So in our plan, the conceptual plan that Sound Transit put forth in 2016, it includes a 500 stall parking lot, I guess, next to the station. So that is sort of the default that Sound Transit will be starting with.
Commissioner Krass?
Hi. So when they picked other locations for the ones that already exist, how did Sound Transit, how did they go about doing this? Because it sounds like we're thinking about it for years. I mean, what point do they start engaging? Have they already started looking at Issaquah to say, oh, this is kind of where we think it's going to be, and then you guys kind of, so I'm just curious how they've done it in the past and how they're doing it now.
Yeah, the thinking has changed a lot over the years. So this is something that, you know, in the light rail planning guide, where we acknowledge that Sound Transit's goalposts will often shift, so we want to be on top of that. In 2015, I believe is what I said, we designated Central Issaquah as a regional growth center. So that was really the impetus of us being on the map for Sound Transit. So we are, you know, at that point, we identified that we will be having a lot of growth. That growth will provide jobs and housing. So Sound Transit is providing transit service. So they're really interested in having a lot of people, a lot of jobs, a lot of school activity. They want to move people. So where there's densities of people or where it's planned to be, that's where they're going to want to put service. So in terms of Lakemont, that was another provisional station. There's some density over there in that part of, I believe it's unincorporated Bellevue. So they acknowledge that there are people and jobs and housing there that they want to connect. So that is sort of like their thought process.
That was more like, when do they engage and say, oh, where Costco is now, that's where we want it? I mean, how do they go about thinking about where they, and how they're the ones who are choosing where it goes, and I assume it doesn't matter what's there now because they'll do eminent domain because there's things already built there. So I'm just curious how that works and when do they engage in that, and if they already have.
There is a planning process. That is how they begin any of these studies. So they'll look at a couple locations and they'll look at things like how much land costs and how much their budget is, and the areas that they're trying to connect in terms of jobs and housing. They're going to look at the land use capabilities. So in Central Issaquah, we allow for higher density, which is why they would put it there and not like somewhere else. As an example, in Old Town, we have provisions that like would not even allow that.
We already know it's going to be in Central. I'm just saying,
right.
Within that green area,
Yep.
They need a certain number of acres. I'm just curious, when do they start engaging? Because they have to buy the land. I'm just curious, so we say in 2027 they're going to start doing it, or have they already started doing it?
They have not done that. So they will begin the planning process. They will identify locations. They will then do an environmental review to make sure that there's no fatal flaws with any location. At that point, I believe, is when they start purchasing. So we can think about that being like in the 2030s, yeah. Commissioner Matthews?
I'm sorry. I'm going to jump way ahead of the horse, but the cart's way behind. But, you look at the station in Mercer Island and made me wonder, does Issaquah have any say in how the final station is designed, or is that completely up to Sound Transit?
Yeah, we do have a lot of levers to use. So, Commissioner Krass had mentioned about like the footprint of the station and sort of like the operational needs. We have the ability to use land use and zoning to sort of facilitate that. So we can say specifically, like, if we don't want the track in this part of Old Town, in this part of Central Issaquah, if we don't want a station to be located there, like, we would we would formalize that. In terms of the operational components, we want to make sure that we're not preventing Sound Transit or King County Metro, for that matter, who's going to bring connective buses. We want to make sure that we're not like preventing them from doing what they need to do, but also like we want to make sure that it's going to be compatible with the community. So each parcel will be studied. They have, they have folks in their staff that will look at like sort of the value that a land could be to their needs. And then, they would consider like operational things. And as we're doing this study, we are bringing in these agencies. So we're not just thinking about it with consultants and just us. We have a team that I'm calling Ski Team. I'm trying to be fun with it. But it's going to be WashDOT, the Department of Transportation, Puget Sound Regional Council, all of our transit agencies. We're bringing them in so that they can help us know what the needs are going to be, acknowledging that because we are end of the line, potentially bus operators are going to need a place to use the restroom, and like they're going to need to stop and rest, and like there's like land needs for that. Also, we know that in every end of the line station, you can see this in Redmond. For example, the line that just opened up, there's additional length in the track in order to like stop the trains. So we're thinking about all these things. There's going to be like needs for all these, and hoping to bring all these ideas, really looking into this year, but also continuing those conversations as Sound Transit's goalpost may shift. So we are thinking about sort of operational considerations and like the land that would be required for any of these decisions.
Commissioner Issaquah.
Thank you. My question is, do you have any plans from the Sound Transit now, how many people they are expecting to have on their trains daily?
I believe that the 2016 numbers were about 8,000 riders initially. Yeah.
Okay, and we have only 500 parking spots. That is my concern.
Parking is a definite concern, but there are ways around that. You can see this in Redmond. They use a distributed parking network. So they have park and rides. They have a couple park and rides in Redmond. They're also within vicinity of other stations that have parking. So depending on where like folks are traveling from, there's options. So that's going to be an important strategy as we try to thread the needle between the vision and guiding principles, which say we want a like urban walkable neighborhood that's like really like a nice place to be, versus, for example, on the other side of the coin, there's a station that is only a parking lot with nothing around it, and you wouldn't really want to spend any time there. So those are sort of, and you can see these around the region, they exist. So we're trying to move towards the vision of like having a nice, walkable urban village, and that parking is very important, but we also want to be judicious with where we put that parking and those resources. They should exist, but just where they exist is another question.
A follow-up. As the end of the line station, we are aware that people from Preston, people from North Bend probably will be using our station to go to the airport. So do we have any kind of like conversations with those cities to provide parking there and then kind of like busing people here, something like that?
Yeah, King County Metro runs our buses, and they've been thinking about this much longer than we have. One example is in Sammamish, they're going to build a new parking structure. So that's, that is a thing that is known. I believe it's supposed to be built a year after we receive service. So Metro is currently, strapped for money. But that is built into their planning. I anticipate that more connective and like parking facilities could be in their planning. Metro is very interested in, so is Sound Transit, connecting park and ride facilities to light rail, and we can see this happening in Bellevue and Redmond. Most of their service that is really being improved between now and like actually in the next couple months will be more reliable, like faster bus service, getting people out of their cars to light rail service so they can like get into the city in Seattle or like Redmond or Bellevue where lots of the major job centers are. So I believe that that's going to be the strategy moving forward for them. So I would imagine that more of these park and ride facilities would be in play, yeah.
Commissioner Adair, would you like to ask a question or speak? Nope. Okay. Yeah, no, I think that's great, Thomas. I know we've talked about this before, and clearly I really like the idea of an urban village, high-end restaurants, high-end shopping, something like similar to like the Bravern and Bellevue. I mean, that's like you said, you want people to be bustling, you want it to be a place that's lively, especially with the end of the line, we have our own circumstances. And the last thing we want is just empty parking structures that could create a whole different situation where it could be not a very pleasant place. So I'm glad to hear you guys are spending all this time planning. The idea is to influence Sound Transit. To your credit, the more work we do and the more work that we're able to present to them, obviously they're going to take that report seriously. So I think that's the idea, is we're trying to influence their decision as much as possible. So hats off, and I know it's a lot of hard work, and it's going to be a while before you see it all come to fruition, but it'll be great when it happens. 2044, right? That's the current?
We're hoping for 2041, but Sound Transit said they can deliver as late as 2044. So okay. We're doing what we can to make it as smooth of a project for them as possible, acknowledging that it's not our project, but we're going to make it easy for them to do the right thing by this community.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. That's great. Yeah, come back anytime. We love talking about Sound Transit. Okay, well, thank you, Thomas. Everybody got to ask questions, concerns? All right. We're going to move along. So again, thank you, Thomas, for city council updates from, I believe, Minnie.
So earlier on Tuesday, Planning Development and Environment Committee, we had two items. One was impact fee updates. So the new state law was passed that says we have to base our impact fees for residential development based on the size of the unit. We had single-family rate and we had multifamily rate, but we had to redo based on a sliding scale based on the size of the unit. So there's a lot of math that went into what that scale is and all that. But at the end of the day, we established a minimum, because based on an occupant, and for a lot of these, it was about 800 square foot unit. And then at the maximum end, it's 3,500. So at that point, the rates flatten out, but between those two sizes, there's a sliding scale. So that got discussed and debated and is going to go to council on the 21st. The other item was Bellevue College, who owns about 21 acres up on Highlands, and it's undeveloped right now. Bellevue College intended to build a satellite campus back in 2010, 2011, when they entered into a development agreement. Their enrollment, their whole strategy has changed, and at this point, they are looking for leasing the land for the highest and best, investment opportunity that they can get as a not to sell, but to get some lease money and dollars, because they have also been hit by state budget and other things. So that was discussed, and that's going to council to give them a 2-year extension because their entitlements to build residential expire at the end of this year, but they wanted 2 more years to kind of plan for what they want to plan to do with that property. And so but they can build a campus, the satellite, the institutional use, that development agreement goes on until 2040, I believe. Those 2 items. Title 18 policy updates that you all had discussed, we discussed those with council committee not this last meeting, but the previous one. So those are also slated for adoption on the July 21st. So a lot happening with council on July 21st. The other item council has been looking at is the transit-oriented development project site next to the transit center. about 4-acre lot between Newport and Mall Street. The city has been engaged in that process to get some affordable housing for a long period of time, since I believe 2015 or even before that. Facilitated the relocation of the cell tower on Tibbetts Park because there were a lot of carriers with that. The Lumen owned the property, now King County Housing Authority owns it. We are currently reviewing their land use approval to build 2 buildings, one affordable building and one market rate building that Development Commission will make a decision on. But during that process, they are going to counsel, or before the Development Commission decision, they're going to counsel for some deviations approved under what is called a housing cooperative agreement. So there's a tool between King County Housing Authority and the cities can enter into to provide some flexibility. And so some of the things they've asked for in that are related to not balconies for every unit, not having a step back on the topmost unit, not lining up, because there's a new road that's going to go along the edge, a new, to break up the mega blocks, there's a code requirement to put up a new through block passage with a new street. So they've asked for some deviations related to they're not going to line that new street with commercial uses. There'll be a parking garage along that edge, things of that nature. So, and then the tree stuff that you all debated on the Central Issaquah, I mean, that showcased some of those things. Even though there's a wetland on the property, they're saving some trees there, but the trees along the street edge and in the middle of the property are going to go. So they're getting some deviations related to that through this HCA, Housing Cooperative Agreement with council. That's what's land use stuff and, council's dealing with, among other things.
Okay, well, thank you, Minnie. Any other updates, any city updates, any fun updates?
No, we, the permit process improvements was our priority, and that is still our priority for 2025. We've been working away at, working through our standard operating procedures and others, but Economic Vitality Commission was also asking questions on that, so I'm going to them next week, the 16th, to give them an update on the permit process improvements, because they haven't heard from us what we're doing, so.
All right, we love the EVC. Okay, I believe that takes care of most things. Any mention of the calendar? I know next meeting may be a TBD.
Is out. She comes back next week, and so we'll send a cancellation notice if there's nothing on the agenda. My sense is we're going to cancel it.
Okay. All right. Well, again, thank you everyone for a wonderful discussion this evening. Thank you to our awesome staff, Tisha Geezer, Thomas Valdrez, somewhere around here, and obviously Minnie Dollywall. Thank you guys for coming. Thank you, everybody, and we will adjourn this evening at 8:37 p.m.